Hi there, this is episode 67 of Prague Talk, a podcast produced by Radio Prague International, and my name is Ian Willoughby. This time out we've got a very special guest for you, and that is the Czech Minister of Foreign Affairs, Jan Lipavský. Mr. Lipavský became a major supporter of Ukraine after Russia's invasion of the country in February last year, and regularly called out Moscow's aggression in forthright language. The issue of the war was also key during the Czech presidency of the Council of the EU in the second half of 2022. And as you'll hear, we discussed lots of aspects of the Ukraine conflict, as well as a host of other issues linked to Czech foreign policy. So this is me with Jan Lipavský in this edition of Prague Talk. Czechia's EU presidency has just come to an end. You won a lot of praise for how Czechia handled the presidency. What does the country gain from having this kind of good, positively received presidency?
I'm very happy that I do hear very often that we did a good presidency. And of course, it was a huge task for the Czech state and for our new government. And I'm happy that we did it successfully. What is the gain? The gain is the good name of Czechia in Europe. We showed that we are a constructive partner. We showed that we are able to manage and lead by example, and sometimes offer a good compromise. It was not about showing and dictating what Europe should do. The European Union is about a lot of work and finding a right compromise when the things are sometimes very delicate, and especially for example, sanction regimes or debate about energy security and the energy crisis caused by Vladimir Putin. It is something which are very hot topics. So we were able to navigate through it. That was our role, to navigate.
Speaking of Vladimir Putin, generally speaking, what impact do you think Russia's war on Ukraine has had on the European Union in the last 11 months? Has it strengthened the EU or has it highlighted differences?
Putin is mentally at the war with the West. The EU, Europe, is part of this West he wants to fight and destroy. And his aim was to divide and conquer, which is the Latin saying. And I am very happy to say that he is not successful in dividing Europe. Of course, we have a lot of discussions, there are different views and different interests, but at the end of the day, the European consensus of the common and foreign defense policy is very, very strong. So we have to say that he is totally unsuccessful in his attempts to divide us, and we are stronger than ever.
But at the same time, Czechia does take a stronger line in supporting Ukraine and opposing Russia than perhaps some countries. I know some Czechs are disappointed, for example, by the performance of Germany during this crisis. How do you explain the difference in approach or attitude to what's happening in Ukraine between countries like Czechia, other countries in former Eastern Bloc, and big countries like Germany and France?
We have to explain our position. We have to explain our fear. We have to explain our historical experience, which is very strong with Moscow rule in Czechia and in Poland and Balts. And the more Putin is doing, the more Western countries in Europe listen to us, understand our experience, and the more they listen to our warnings. It's a complex matter, and patience and a lot of work is helping us to push our positions ahead, political positions.
Czech leaders frequently say that Ukraine is also fighting for our freedom. Is that purely an abstract concept, or is there a literal sense in which Ukraine, holding out against the Russians so well, is making Czech people safer?
Definitely, Ukraine is fighting for our freedom, for our way of life. They are holding back Russians. If you look at Russian media, the propaganda which is there, you will hear and see such a hatred against Europe, open calls to invade another European countries, bombard and destroy cities. And brave Ukrainians are holding this kind of evil back.
especially considering the invasion of 2014 of an annexation of Crimea. How did the West come to evidently underestimate Putin so much?
There was a notion that Russia could be changed through trade, through business relationship. And this notion, especially Germany, proved totally wrong. Of course, it would be nice if Russia would be able to transform into at least semi-democratic and semi-free country. It did not happen. We see the otherwise. Every day in Russia now brings more and more totalitarianship, and people are fed with war propaganda. So the development is not good. But I see that all these atrocities and horrendous war crimes which happened in Ukraine because of Mr. Putin's decision to wage a war against Ukraine, and I'm speaking about Bucha, destruction of Mariupol, systematic destruction of energy infrastructure of Ukraine. It all proves to even the most skeptical Western countries that definitely this attempt to have a good relationship, good business relationship with Russia is wrong, and that we need to support Ukraine. So this is what is happening every day.
One thing I often think about is that if Russia is, as people say, many people say, essentially a dictatorship headed by Putin, how much can ordinary Russians be held accountable for what the country is doing to Ukraine? If you protest in Russia, you will go to a pretty nasty jail for a long time.
This is almost a philosophical question of collective responsibility of nations for their actions, but we know exactly who gives orders in Ukraine. It was Putin and his leadership who decided that Russia will attack Ukraine. Those should be held accountable. Therefore, we are, as Czechia, we are supporting the idea of creation of the tribunal for prosecution of the crime of aggression, as it is defined in the Charter of United Nations. And of course, in many cases, we know who were physically conducting those war crimes, specific war crimes, as in Bucha, who ordered which general, which colonel, even sometimes name of specific soldiers who were going door by door and killing innocent civilians, men, women, elder people, kids. And those crimes should be prosecuted too. So the fate of individual Russian, of course, it's not in direct action of this war, but the war is happening in such a scale that it's hard to distinguish specifically.
I think the EU has already had 9 packages of sanctions against Russia. Are sanctions now kind of exhausted as a method of responding to Russia?
I wouldn't say they are exhausted. On the contrary, we have new options. Especially, we see that Russia is trying to procure Western technologies because they are not able to produce many things which are necessary for their war effort, for producing the high quality weapons, which is very important to be looking for the ways how they are trying to, through different kind of proxies, to avoid sanctions. And of course, the biggest task is to sustain in our effort to hold sanctions. They need to be prolonged every 6 months, so the regime will be discussed again, and it's quite a lot of effort. So, and the sanctions are working. We see that the production in many industrial areas in Russia is falling, and it is impacting significantly in the war effort.
How long do you imagine this conflict could go on for?
This is a very hard question, and there's no clear answer to that. We need to be ready for a long war. We need to be ready for a war effort, and it must be Ukraine's side, which is protecting its sovereignty and territorial integrity, which will say when it's ready to negotiate about peace. Anyway, Zelensky proposed a peace plan, but of course it includes demand that Russia will leave Ukrainian territory, which is definitely on contrary to what Russians are trying to do with all that fake annexation and presence on the ground.
The war could, of course, continue for a very long time, but assuming there is a conclusion eventually, and that Putin is still in power when that conclusion happens, how will the West be able to deal with him after all these atrocities, after all these war crimes? He's not like a normal politician anymore. He's way, way beyond that. How will the West be able to deal with this man?
So there's no clear answer to that. And when I speak about the fact that there should be the special tribunal for prosecution crime of aggression, of course, this is pointing to Mr. Putin and for his responsibility for the Russian war against Ukraine. On the other side, we have seen examples in history. Every war ends with diplomacy. And we have seen different ways how the war can end. But I think it's not about to create the vision how this could end. I think it's more about to be assuring Ukraine that we won't negotiate peace without them and that we will not destroy the very basic principles of the UN Charter and the international order created after the end of the Second World War. And this very basic principle is that the borders are not changed through the brute force, which is the crime of aggression, actually. So it's not an easy to construct such a situation, but the war may end in a different ways.
One final question in this area. You have visited Kiev. Tell us about your experiences of going there.
So I have visited Kiev last year 3 times. Once before the war started, 3 weeks before the war. I met with complete leadership of Ukraine. I met my counterpart Dmytro Kuleba, Prime Minister Shmyhal and President Zelensky. Before the war, the atmosphere was very tense. And after the war broke out, I have to say that I've seen such a strong resolution in Ukrainian leadership to fight and win, to protect Ukraine from Russia, that I'm fully convinced that they are able to do so. Of course, they are not able to do so alone. They need Western help. But I'm very happy to see that Ukraine is able to use very effectively the help we are providing to them. So this gives me hope that they will be able to fulfill this task. And personally, to see empty city, which used to be buzzing with everyday life, streets full of people and coffee shops and restaurants, to see half empty because people left the city or are not able to be so much in the streets, it's strange. But on the other side, still, Kiev is working as a city. It's not a ghost city. It's touching in a certain sense.
I wonder how many nations would have been able to stand up as they have stood up to the Russians. What do you think it is about the Ukrainian character that allows them to be so united and strong?
When you speak to Ukrainians, you will hear a lot about their history. And they will be speaking 1,000 years back. So Ukrainian statehood, it's a long story, it's a long history. Different empires controlled and tried to control territory of Ukraine, and always Ukrainians strive for their own way, how to have own state. They finally achieved that, they value it, and they are doing 100% job to protect it.
Closer to home, in recent years, Czechia has been quite active in the Visegrad 4, but now I guess it's fair to say that Viktor Orban of Hungary is seen as rather toxic by much of Europe. I know you've said in the past that the Visegrad 4 is a discussion forum. Does that mean effectively that it's over as a kind of active political alliance, or is it on hold?
Czechia needs partners for its foreign policy. Czechia needs a strong Central European dialogue. We don't want to do things in the world alone. V4 is a very logical format for cooperation, but it's not the only one. We have, for example, Slavkov cooperation, and I was speaking about visits to Kiev. So 2 visits of 3 happened under the umbrella of Slavkov format with my counterparts for Slovakia and Austria. And we are doing more and more in this constellation. Would there be a better atmosphere in V4? I'm ready to do much more in a V4, which is a logical format. V4 is 30 years old. It was founded as a V3 at that time when the Czechoslovakia existed. And it was founded by names like Václav Havel or Lech Walesa. So definitely current atmosphere in V4 which is quite tense, I have to say, and the cooperation, it's not much active. Doesn't mean that we would like to discard the V4 as such, definitely not. And we need to meet, we need to discuss, we have to have a frank and open debate, which has happened in Bratislava recently. And Czechia will preside V4 in the next cycle, which begins in summer. So we are now in active preparation of the platform for this V4 cooperation. And definitely, we live in a Central Europe area. We share same problems. The energy crisis is hitting Czechia, Slovakia, Poland, also Hungary in the same way. The same goes for illegal migration, and same goes for many other issues. So we have a lot of in common, and maybe politically we are not able to put same punchlines into our speeches, but it doesn't mean that the V4 as such should be abandoned.
If I can move on to China, in 2014, Czechia launched a so-called reset of relations with China. There was a big shift in policy. From today's perspective, how do you view that move or that attempt?
So we are in a process of revision, our relationship with China. I would say that especially those areas of security issues which are now rising in our eyes are dealt in organizations like the EU, NATO. So we want to be constructive partner here because the important policies for the security of supply chains, speaking about microchips or medicine, for example, needs to be done commonly. And also it is valid for our policies in organizations under the umbrella of United Nations, etc. So this is one big result of our revision of policy between the Czechia and China. The bilateral relations are not so intensive as such, but also it would be nice to be looking for ways how to change the deficit in a trade, for example.
But was it a mistake to try to be a friend of China?
I think it was an attempt which proved totally wrong, especially in a way which was conducted. And definitely we should not abandon any of our values, especially when we see that, for example, Ukraine is literally fighting for those values. So we should not definitely abandon them in any kind of hope that we will please Chinese side. So our relationship with China needs to be pragmatical. We need to be protecting our core values. But on the other side, let's be looking for business opportunities. Of course, this is not something which we should completely exclude.
In the past, we've heard from some Czech leaders about the importance of so-called economic diplomacy. To be honest, I'm not quite sure what that is. Is economic diplomacy still a thing? Is it something that you are pushing?
It is a big thing, and we are pushing it very much. Economic diplomacy is about to promote Czechia as a modern, open country for business, as a country which is producing incredible things which are helping to our partners to, for example, in Africa, lift the quality of the health service. And in certain other areas, it may improve their military capabilities if they are procuring the Czech, for example, Tatra trucks. So, of course, the war in Ukraine focused us on the security issues here in Europe, but for example, my deputy traveled all around the world with many companies to promote their businesses. And in certain countries, the business and politics are very much connected, basically meaning the same thing. I'm not speaking about the most democratic countries. I'm speaking about the countries where the power is shared in a different way. We have a lot of monarchies, for example, in the world, and states which still we want to have as a business partners, which is totally legit. So the politics and foreign affairs plays important role in promoting business interests. So my ministry is actively working on that.
Some observers say that under your leadership at the Czech Ministry of Foreign Affairs, there's been a return to a more values-based foreign policy. What are the values that underpin your approach?
It's a human freedom, it's a democracy, it's a freedom of speech. It's what's allowed to our way of life, our Western way of life, which we need to protect, we need to nurture it. If you look around the world, it's not something given. It's something we need to protect, and we need to also protect it internationally.
And practically, what are you doing to help foster, for example, democracy in other parts of the world?
It's a long-term process. It's a long-term investment. And for example, our human rights policy is very much focused on helping journalists and to build up capacity of free media. We do a lot of projects in that regard. We are members of the Media Freedom Coalition, which was formed in reaction to Chinese seizure, I would use, of Hong Kong and many other aspects. So this is a long-term investment. And Václav Havel said that if we don't care about the problem of others, then no one will care for us. So we are trying to care about the problem of others.
The outgoing President Miloš Zeman has at times publicly advanced policies that are different from the official foreign policy of Czechia. He also is not communicating or doesn't communicate with you. How would you like the next president, the incoming president who takes office in March, to ideally behave, especially on the international front?
I would like to see president which will represent Czechia in its full colors, and president which will unite society, the president which will protect, nurture the constitution, the Czech constitution. We have celebrated recently 30 years of adopting it, since Czechia, as an independent state, the Czech Republic, is 30 years. And I think there are candidates, and I won't put forward any name, which definitely are more than 100% to fulfill this role.
In 2022, there was a kind of fresh push to promote the name Czechia as a short name for the Czech Republic. I noticed that you use Czechia, but at the same time, you must know that many people dislike it. Why are you in favor of Czechia so much?
Czechia is a short name for the Czech Republic. It is like that. It's a fact. It's not something to discuss. It's something to get used to and to promote. And my ministry is doing a lot to promote Czechia in international scene. Of course, to change name, many people are very used to Czechoslovakia, and the name the Czech Republic, which is the full and proper name of the Czech Republic, was and is used sometime in the places where Czechia is a short name, is properly to be used. And look at Turkey, which were able to change its name basically overnight. And the name Czechia is not something new. It's something which was there almost always. We have historical evidence of that in many hundred years back. And to have a one proper short name also is very important for building a good national identity. And we have seen and we are witnessing that Czech population get used to word Česko quite well, and I see a lot of positive vibes around Česko and Czechia, so I'm also promoting it internationally.
But just today I visited the website of the Czech embassy in London, and it says it's the embassy of the Czech Republic. Don't you need to be more consistent in presentation?
The Czech Republic is the official name of the Czech Republic, and there's a set of rules when to use it and when not to use it, and we are slowly, of course, adapting and looking even in the cases like that. So I don't know what should be the proper way on the website in London. Definitely it's not wrong.
My final question, the EU presidency is over now. It was a success, as we've been saying. But what's next for the Czech Foreign Ministry like this year? Are there any particular projects you want to focus on, or countries or parts of the world you want to focus on?
So definitely I would like to promote Czechia in distant regions like South America, Africa and Asia. So I'm preparing travels here. I will lead a business delegation to India, and that's one part of that. The other part is, of course, the war in Ukraine. Until it's here, we need to be ready to solve all the issues and to be helping Ukraine and solve consequences of the war in Ukraine, like migration crisis, energy crisis. So it's a big effort. And the last but not least, we are writing a new versions of our strategies, speaking about security strategy and foreign affairs strategy. So this is what will fulfill our our days at the ministry, and the Magnitsky law, the sanction law, started to be valid the 1st of January. So we are actively working on it.
And that's the law that you put forward even before you were a minister?
That's the law, yeah.
Many thanks indeed to the Czech Minister of Foreign Affairs, Jan Lipavský, for that wide-ranging interview for Prague Talk. This is a podcast produced by Radio Prague International, and there are over 6 other episodes out there. So if you're new to us, why not check some of them out and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. But for now, from me, Ian Willoughby, thank you very much indeed for joining us on Prague Talk. I'll talk to you again very soon.